The council awaits your decision, my lord.
The Hall of Judgment was silent. Thousands of alien nobles sat in rising circles of crystal seats, their eyes fixed on the lone human standing at the center. He was unarmed, unarmored, and very small compared to everyone else in the room. The queen sat above them all, on a throne carved from black starstone, her presence heavy and absolute. She was the ruler of the most powerful empire in the galaxy, feared across hundreds of worlds. No one spoke unless she allowed it. No one looked at her longer than a breath. Humans were not respected here. They were barely remembered. A scattered race, survivors of old wars, tolerated but never trusted. This human had been brought as a formality. A final witness. A symbolic gesture before his people were erased from the last trade routes. Everyone expected him to beg. Some expected him to cry. Others hoped he would scream. He did none of those things. He stood straight, his hands relaxed at his sides, his eyes calm. The queen studied him with mild curiosity. She had seen countless beings kneel before her. She had watched generals break, rulers collapse, and entire species surrender in fear. This human was different. Not brave in the way warriors were brave. Not loud, not proud. Just steady. She lifted one finger, and the guards lowered their weapons slightly. "You may speak," she said, her voice smooth and cold. The human took a slow breath. He did not look away. He did not bow. The court held its breath. What he said next was not planned. Not rehearsed. Not calculated for survival. He spoke the truth as he saw it. "You are sexy," he said, simply. The word echoed through the chamber like a shockwave. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Several nobles stood in anger. Weapons powered up in an instant. No one had ever spoken to the queen like that. Not in praise. Not in insult. Not ever. To speak of her appearance in such a personal way was forbidden beyond imagination. The guards rushed forward, blades humming, energy fields rising. The human did not move. He did not try to explain. He did not apologize. He only waited. The queen did not order his death. That alone shattered centuries of expectation. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes narrowing, not with rage, but with interest. The room fell completely silent again. She rose from her throne and descended a single step. Each movement commanded the room without effort. She stopped, looking directly at the human. Close enough now that he could feel the pressure of her presence. Her voice dropped to a whisper, meant only for him, yet somehow heard by everyone. "No human ever dared say that," she said. The guards froze, unsure what to do. The nobles exchanged uneasy glances. This was wrong. Everything about this moment was wrong. The queen should have killed him. She should have erased him without thought. Instead, she studied him like a puzzle she had never seen before. "Why," she asked calmly, "did you speak those words?" The human answered honestly. "Because I saw you, not your throne." A murmur spread through the court. Some in disbelief. Some in fear. The queen felt something unfamiliar. Not anger. Not pleasure. Curiosity. For the first time in centuries, someone had not spoken to her as a symbol. Not as a ruler. Not as a force of nature. But as a being. She turned away slowly, walking back toward her throne. The guards waited for the execution order that never came. "Remove everyone," the queen said, her voice steady. The court erupted in confusion. Nobles protested, officials hesitated. "I said remove everyone," she repeated. The chamber emptied within seconds, leaving only the queen and the human standing in the vast hall. The doors sealed shut. The human realized then that he was still alive. And that survival might now be more dangerous than death. The queen faced him again, her expression unreadable. "You will remain here," she said. "Your fate is undecided." As the lights dimmed and the silence returned, one truth became clear. A single human sentence had done what wars never could. It had made the Queen pause. And if you want to find out what happens next, and how this moment changes the balance of the galaxy, gently consider subscribing to this channel so you don't miss the rest of the story. The Queen took her seat once more. The human stood alone beneath her gaze. And the galaxy unknowingly stepped toward a future no one had planned. The silence after the doors sealed felt heavier than any weapon. The vast chamber seemed larger now, emptier, as if the walls themselves were listening. The human stood where he was left, aware that one wrong word could still end everything. The Queen remained on her throne, unmoving, her fingers resting lightly on the armrests. For many long seconds, she said nothing. In the past, silence from her always meant death. This time, it meant thought. The human understood that clearly. He did not try to fill the quiet. He did not lower his eyes. He did not step back. That restraint surprised her more than his words had. Finally, the Queen spoke. "Most beings beg when they face me," she said calmly. "Some try to impress me, some threaten me, some lie." She leaned forward slightly. "You did none of these things." The human nodded once, slowly. "I had nothing to offer," he replied. "And nothing to threaten you with." Her eyes narrowed, not in anger, but in careful focus. "Then explain why you still spoke," she said. The human took a breath, choosing honesty over safety. "Because silence would have been a lie," he answered. That answer disturbed her, though she did not show it. Lies were common in the galaxy. Silence was often rewarded. Truth was rare and usually punished. Yet this human treated truth as something natural. She stood again and descended the remaining steps, stopping only a short distance from him. At this range, the difference between them was clear. Her presence felt ancient and overwhelming. His felt small but strangely steady. "You understand," she said softly. "That speaking to me as you did breaks every law of this empire." "Yes," the human replied. "I understood that before I spoke." "And yet you did it anyway," she said. "Yes," he answered again. This was not defiance. This was not rebellion. It was choice. The Queen turned and began to walk slowly around him, her footsteps echoing through the chamber. "You are afraid," she observed. "Yes," the human admitted. That answer surprised her again. Most claimed fearlessness. Most tried to hide weakness. "And yet you stood firm," she said. "Fear does not decide everything," he replied. "It only reminds us what matters." She stopped walking. "For centuries," the Queen said, "I have ruled through certainty. My decisions are immediate. My judgments final." She faced him once more. "You have introduced uncertainty." The word tasted unfamiliar to her. The human did not smile. He did not look proud. "I did not mean to," he said. "But I could not speak any other way." The Queen studied his face carefully. Not searching for deception, but for motive. She found none that fit her understanding. "Do you know why humans were never trusted?" she asked. The human hesitated, then shook his head. "We were told it was because humans adapt too fast," she continued. "Because you change your minds. Because you refuse to remain what you were." She paused. "Now I see another reason." The human waited. "You speak as individuals," she said. "Not as servants to systems. Not as echoes of tradition." She turned away and walked back toward her throne, each step slower than before. "This makes you unpredictable," she added. "And unpredictability frightens empires." The human felt the truth of her words settle over him. "So why am I still alive?" he asked quietly. The Queen stopped, her back still turned. "Because killing you would be simple," she said. "And simplicity no longer satisfies me." She sat once more upon the throne, her posture composed, yet changed in some subtle way. "You will not be executed," she declared. The human released a breath he did not realize he was holding. "But you will not be freed either," she continued. Guards appeared silently at the edges of the chamber, awaiting command. "You will remain under my authority," she said. "You will answer when I ask. And you will speak honestly, as you have done." The human nodded, understanding the danger had only shifted shape. The queen raised one hand, dismissing the guards again before they could touch him. "I want to understand," she said quietly. "Why one sentence from a human disturbed an empire built on fear?" She looked at him with something close to anticipation. "Until I do," she added. "Your life belongs to my curiosity." The human stood alone beneath the throne, knowing now that his survival was no longer accidental. It was intentional. And somewhere beyond the sealed walls of the chamber, the empire waited, unaware that its queen had chosen not to kill. And that choice, small and silent, carried the weight of a coming storm. Time moved strangely inside the palace. Days passed without sunlight, measured only by the quiet rhythm of guards changing shifts. The human was not locked in chains. He was not placed in a cell. Instead, he was given a simple chamber near the inner halls, clean, silent, watched but not threatened. This confused the palace servants more than cruelty ever would have. No prisoner had ever been kept this close to the queen's private domain. Every day, the queen summoned him. Not for punishment. Not for judgment. But for conversation. They met in a smaller hall, away from the throne room, a place with no witnesses and no ceremony. There were no guards inside. No weapons drawn. Only distance. The queen would stand near the window that looked out into the endless stars. The human would remain across from her, calm, waiting. She asked him questions. Not about politics. Not about war. But about humans. "How do your kind choose leaders?" she asked one day. The human answered simply. Sometimes wisely, sometimes badly. That honesty unsettled her. Most species praised themselves endlessly. Claimed perfection. Claimed destiny. Humans did neither. Another day she asked. "Why did you not kneel when you entered my court?" The human thought for a moment before replying. "Because kneeling would have meant I feared you more than I respected myself." The room felt colder after that answer. Respect for oneself was not a concept the empire valued. Obedience was. The queen noticed something else as well. The human never tried to charm her. Never flattered her power. Never repeated his first bold words. He spoke only when asked. And when he did, he spoke carefully, but never falsely. This restraint intrigued her more than confidence ever could. "You understand," she said one evening. "That one command from me could end you." "Yes," the human replied. "And yet you still speak freely," she said. "Yes," he answered again. She turned to face him fully, studying his posture, his expression, the steady way he met her gaze. "You are not fearless," she observed. "No," he said. "I am aware." That word stayed with her. Aware. Not arrogant. Not reckless. Aware of danger, aware of consequence. The queen began to realize something unsettling. Humans did not deny fear. They carried it. And still acted. This was not weakness. It was discipline. One cycle, she tested him. She described the many ways humans had failed in the past. Wars lost, worlds burned, treaties broken. She waited for defense. For excuses. The human listened quietly, then said, "Yes, we failed. But we learned." The queen frowned slightly. "Learning does not undo failure," she said. "No," he replied. "But it changes the next choice." That was when she felt it clearly. Humans were not bound to what they were. They were shaped by what they survived. This terrified empires. In the council halls beyond the private chambers, whispers began to grow. The queen was changing. She was delaying decisions. She was questioning outcomes. All because of one human. Some advisors demanded his removal. Others demanded his death. The queen listened, but did not act. One night, an attempt was made. A blade slipped through the shadows, aimed not at the queen, but at the human. He heard it before he saw it. The shift of air. The intent. He turned just in time, but not fast enough. The blade would have struck. But it never did. Energy flared. A shield snapped into place. The queen stood at the end of the hall, her hand raised, her eyes burning with controlled fury. The attacker was gone within seconds, erased without sound. The human stared, shocked. She lowered her hand slowly. "Do not mistake curiosity for weakness," she said coldly. The human nodded, understanding something important. This was no longer an experiment. This was protection. Later, alone again, the queen spoke quietly. "You make my empire uncomfortable," she said. "I never intended to," the human replied. "I know," she said. "That is what makes it worse." She turned toward the stars once more, her reflection faint in the glass. For the first time, she added, "I am not certain the old rules still serve us." The human did not answer. He understood now that silence was sometimes more powerful than words. The queen allowed herself a small, rare smile. It was not meant for him, but for the future she could no longer ignore. And deep within the palace, fear spread quietly. Not fear of humans, but fear of change. Because the queen was learning what empires feared most. The human mind was different. And it could not be controlled the way the galaxy once believed. The change did not stay hidden for long. Empires were built on patterns. On routine. On rulers who acted the same way every time. When the queen began to pause. When she began to ask instead of command. The empire felt it like a crack in stone. Whispers spread through the upper halls. From advisors to generals. From governors to priests of old law. Something was wrong. The queen had delayed 3 executions. Cancelled 2 military expansions. And summoned the human again and again. No one knew what was said behind sealed doors. But everyone knew one thing. The humans still lived. That alone terrified them. Humans were supposed to be weak. Disposable. Silent. Yet this one walked freely inside the inner palace. Watched but untouched. The fear did not come from the human himself. It came from what he represented. Uncertainty. At the War Council, voices grew sharper. "She hesitates," one general warned. "She questions tradition," another said. All because of a single human. They spoke carefully. No one dared accuse the queen directly. But fear had a way of loosening tongues. The council decided something had to be done. Not openly. Not officially. Quietly. The human sensed the shift before it happened. The palace air felt different. Less curious. More cold. Servants avoided his eyes. Guards changed more often. That night, he was summoned. Not by the queen. But by silence. The corridor lights dimmed as he walked. The echo of his footsteps stretching too far. He stopped. Instinct screamed. From the shadows, energy surged. Not one attacker this time. But several. They did not speak. They did not warn. They moved to erase. The human ran, not in panic, but in awareness. Turning corners, using narrow passages. Breathing hard, but focused. A blast struck the wall beside him. Stone shattered. Heat burned the air. He knew he could not escape the palace. He could only survive long enough to be seen. He stumbled into a wide hall. No guards. No cover. The attackers stepped forward, weapons glowing. Then the lights flared white. The queen appeared at the far end of the hall. Her presence hit like gravity. "Enough," she said. Her voice did not rise. It did not need to. The attackers froze. their weapons powered down against their will. You act without my command, she continued. Her tone calm. Dangerously calm. One of them tried to speak. To justify. To explain. He never finished. The queen lifted her hand. And he vanished. Not in violence. But in absolute finality. The others dropped to their knees instantly. The human stood frozen, watching power displayed not in anger, but control. The queen turned to him. Are you harmed? She asked. No, he replied, his voice steady despite everything. She nodded once, satisfied. Then she turned back to the kneeling figures. You feared change, she said. So you chose betrayal. Her gaze swept the hall, as if the entire empire stood before her. Let this be known, she declared. Any who act against my will be removed. The message was clear. And terrifying. The human was no longer just tolerated. He was protected. The next cycle, the queen made it public. In the grand hall, before nobles, generals, and watchers from 100 worlds. She stood with the human at her side. Not behind her. Not below her. This human, she announced, is under my personal protection. Gasps filled the chamber. Any harm to him, she continued, is harm to my authority. The empire shook. For the first time in history, a non-ruling being had been placed so close to the throne. Fear spread faster than rebellion ever could. Some bowed deeper. Some looked away. Some began planning. The human felt the weight of countless eyes. Some filled with hatred. Some with confusion. He understood now. The danger was no longer death. It was becoming a symbol. Later, alone again, he spoke softly. You did not have to do that. The queen looked at him, her expression unreadable. Yes, she said. I did. She turned toward the stars beyond the palace windows. Empires fear many things, she continued. But nothing frightens them more than a ruler who chooses differently. Outside the palace, fleets adjusted positions. Allies questioned loyalty. Enemies watched closely. The empire stood on the edge of something unseen. And it all began with a human who spoke without fear. And a queen who chose not to silence him. The protection did not bring peace. It brought pressure. Across the empire, systems began to shift their positions. Fleets paused at borders. Governors delayed reports. Everyone was watching the queen. And everyone was watching the human. In the War Council chamber, the atmosphere grew tense. Voices were calm, but intentions were sharp. The empire is unsettled, one elder said. Tradition is weakening, another added. They did not accuse the queen. They did not name the human. They did not need to. The queen listened in silence, her face unreadable. Finally, she spoke. You believe this unrest comes from one being, she said. Yes, a general replied carefully. Symbols inspire instability. The queen nodded slowly. Then you believe removing the symbol will restore order, she said. The room remained quiet. That silence was the answer. Later that cycle, the human was summoned. Not to a hall. Not to a chamber of glass and stars. But to a private room deep within the palace. There were no guards. No observers. Only the queen, standing near a single light source. They want you dead, she said plainly. The human absorbed the words without shock. I know, he replied. They believe your existence weakens my authority, she continued. And perhaps they are not wrong. The human looked at her carefully. You can end this, she said. One order. He understood what she was offering. Not mercy. Not cruelty. Escape. I can arrange your removal from the palace, she added. A transport beyond the inner systems. You will live. The human felt the weight of the choice press down on him. Freedom meant safety. Safety meant silence. If I leave, he asked, what happens next? The queen met his gaze. The empire stabilizes, she said. The council regains confidence. And I remain unchanged. The human was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke. If I leave, he said slowly, I confirm what they believe. She tilted her head slightly. And what is that? She asked. That humans run when pressured, he answered. That truth retreats when challenged. The queen watched him closely now. You will die if you stay, she warned. Yes, he replied. That is possible. Then why remain? She asked. The human straightened, not in defiance, but in resolve. Because if I survive by hiding, he said, then everything I said to you becomes meaningless. The room felt heavier after that. For the first time, the queen did not respond immediately. She had ruled through fear. Through inevitability. But this was something else. Loyalty chosen freely. Not to a ruler. Not to power. But to principle. You owe me nothing, she said finally. I know, the human replied. That is why this choice matters. Outside the room, alarms did not sound. But tension spread through the palace like a slow-burning fire. The council had issued an ultimatum. End the human. Or lose the confidence of the empire. The queen stood alone afterward, staring at the dark reflection of herself in the polished walls. For the first time, she felt the cost of ruling honestly. Later, in the grand hall, the council assembled. Their voices measured. Their patience thin. We request resolution, the elder said. The empire requires certainty. The queen rose from her throne. Her movements calm. Deliberate. You demand a choice, she said. Yes, the council replied as one. She looked down at them. At the empire that had obeyed her without question for centuries. Then she spoke words that could never be taken back. There will be no execution, she said. Shock rippled through the chamber. The human remains, she continued. And so does my authority. The council erupted in protest. Voices overlapping. Fear finally breaking restraint. The queen raised her hand, and silence returned instantly. This, she said coldly, is my decision. In that moment, lines were drawn. Not in space, but in loyalty. The human, standing far from the throne, understood the truth clearly now. The test was no longer his alone. The queen had chosen him. And the empire would never be the same again. The reaction was not immediate. Empires rarely broke loudly. They fractured quietly. Across distant systems, messages were delayed. Orders questioned. Responses softened. The queen's decision spread like a slow wave. She had refused the council. She had protected the human. She had chosen uncertainty over tradition. To many, this was unforgivable. In the lower halls of power, generals gathered without permission. Governors spoke in coded phrases. Priests of old law whispered warnings of collapse. The human felt the shift even before he understood it. Servants no longer avoided him. They watched him. Some with curiosity. Some with something close to hope. Others with hatred. One cycle, the queen summoned him later than usual. She stood alone when he arrived, no guards, no advisors. Do you know why humans were marked as weak? She asked without turning. The human hesitated. Because we lost wars, he said. Yes, she replied. But that is not the full truth. She activated a projection. Ancient records filled the air. Battles long forgotten. Names erased from public memory. Long ago, she said. Your kind fought not with strength, but with adaptation. She showed fleets changing tactics mid-conflict. Soldiers learning from defeat instead of repeating it. Empires depend on predictability, she continued. Humans refused to remain predictable. The human watched silently. When you lost, she said. You did not collapse. You learned. She turned to face him now. That terrified us. The room felt colder. So we did not erase you, she continued. We diminished you. We labeled you weak. We limited your reach. The human clenched his hands slowly. Not because you were powerless, she said. But because you were resilient. Outside the palace, the consequences arrived. A sector governor declared independence. A fleet refused to move without confirmation. The empire's unity began to strain. The council returned, no longer calm, no longer patient. This is destabilization, one shouted. Your protection of the human proves our fear. The queen stood unmoved. You fear what you do not control, she said. And you endanger us all, another replied. The human watched from the side, understanding something painful and important. This was not about him anymore. This was about what humans represented. He stepped forward before he was summoned. The room froze. No one interrupted the Queen's counsel. Not ever. You may speak, the Queen said quietly. The human turned to the gathered leaders. You call humans weak, he said. Because we fall. He met their stares, one by one. But falling taught us something, he continued. That survival is not about dominance. It is about adjustment. Murmurs spread. You built systems that never change, he said. And called that strength. He paused, choosing words carefully. We change, he said. And you called that failure. The silence that followed was heavy. The Queen watched him closely, not intervening. You fear humans, he continued. Because we do not obey what no longer works. One general stepped forward, furious. You dare lecture us in our own court, he demanded. Yes, the human replied calmly. Because this court decides the future of more than one species. The Queen raised her hand before anger could explode. That is enough, she said. She turned to the council, her voice steady, firm. You built an empire that fears evolution, she declared. And now that fear has reached its limit. Outside, alarms finally sounded. Not an attack. But division. Several outer systems announced neutrality. Others declared loyalty to the Queen alone. The empire was splitting, not by force, but by belief. Later, alone again, the human spoke quietly. I never wanted this, he said. The Queen looked at him with something close to understanding. Change never asks permission, she replied. She looked out toward the stars, where fleets now hesitated instead of obeyed. Humans are not weak, she said softly. They are mirrors. The human did not ask what she meant. He already knew. They reflected truth. And truth unsettled power. As the palace lights dimmed, one fact became unavoidable. The empire could not return to what it was. And humanity's greatest threat had never been weapons. It was the simple refusal to remain small. The final gathering did not look like a war council. There were no raised voices. No weapons drawn. Only tension thick enough to slow breath. Representatives from divided systems appeared as light and shadow. Some stood with the Queen. Some stood against her. Many stood uncertain. The human remained where he had been placed. Not elevated. Not hidden. Visible to all. The Queen rose slowly from her throne. Her presence settled the chamber into stillness. The empire stands at a crossroads, she said. Not because of rebellion. But because of truth. A murmur passed through the assembly. Truth was not a word often spoken here. She gestured toward the human. Not as a ruler presenting a subject. But as one acknowledging a cause. This being did not threaten us, she continued. He did not command fleets. He did not demand power. She paused, letting the silence work. He spoke honestly. Some leaders shifted uncomfortably. Others watched with careful attention. Long ago, the Queen said, we labeled humans weak because we could not control what they became after loss. She turned, looking across the gathered faces. We feared adaptation, she said, and called it instability. The human felt every gaze return to him. Not hostile now. Not entirely trusting. But listening. The Queen stepped down from the throne. Each step deliberate. Final. She stopped beside the human. Close enough that the chamber leaned inward. This human reminded me, she said quietly. That power without understanding becomes brittle. She faced him then, her voice lowering. Not for the council. Not for the empire. But for him. That first day, she whispered. You spoke without fear. Her words carried anyway. Echoing across the hall. In that moment, she continued. You did not see a queen. You saw a being. The human met her gaze, steady as he had always been. That whisper, she said, changed the direction of an empire. The council waited, unsure what judgment remained. The Queen turned back to them, her voice firm once more. I will not rule through fear alone, she declared. I will not erase truth for comfort. Gasps rippled outward. From this cycle forward, she continued. Humanity will no longer be restricted. No longer diminished. She raised her hand, and ancient laws dissolved into light. Humans will stand as equals, she said. Not rulers. Not subjects. The chamber remained silent. Not in obedience, but in realization. This was not conquest. This was redefinition. Some representatives bowed. Not to the Queen, but to the decision. Others withdrew, unwilling to remain, choosing isolation over change. The human felt the weight of history settle and lift at the same time. Later, when the assembly dispersed, when the empire began the long work of becoming something new, the Queen stood once more by the window of stars. You could have ruled, she said quietly. If you had asked. The human shook his head gently. I never wanted power, he replied. I wanted honesty. She considered that, then nodded. That, she said, is why humans frightened us? Beyond the palace, fleets adjusted their paths. Borders softened. Old enemies hesitated. Not because of force, but because a new example had been set. Humanity did not rise through domination, or vengeance, or conquest. It rose through courage without arrogance, truth without cruelty. As the galaxy watched, unsure and curious, one lesson became clear. The strongest voice was not the loudest. It was the one that spoke without fear. And it all began with a whisper.